All right, so thanks everybody for being here and helping me with the project today. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through our district's accountability, starting in our STAR scores. I'll kind of give you an overview presentation, and then we do have a taper report here for the data and stuff for our district. If you want to, we can start with the PowerPoint presentation that I have here, and I'll kind of walk you through everything there. So to start out, the purpose of this is just to provide a brief overview of the Texas Accountability System, which is the A through F system that the state gives us. I'll give you an overview of how the accountability ratings are determined, highlight the performance of our individual campuses of the district, and discuss areas for improvement. I have talked with the principals from the campuses, so of course they are aware of their scores. They've looked at and identified areas of strengths and weaknesses, and we've kind of talked about those, and we'll talk about those today. And outline the steps for the implementation of the plans. The reason we got everybody together today is just as a district so that we can all be on the same page as where our district's headed, based off the data that the state's given us on our STAR scores and our accountability, so we all kind of know where our individual campuses are headed. So the A through F accountability rating system, of course you guys probably know, but they give each campus grade a letter, and then the district is also given a letter grade, and that's what those letter grades mean. If A is exemplary, B would be a recognized campus, C is acceptable, D needs improvement, and F is considered acceptable from the state. The next one, so what data is used? The district accountability debate data has STAR results, TELPAS, CCMR for high school, and then graduation rates. I'll break it down kind of through here, but each campus kind of has an elementary and junior high are a little bit different. They're very heavily weighted on their STAR scores and their TELPAS scores, where high school has CCMR there, and that's just our college, of course, college carrier and military readiness. We'll talk about when we get to accountability. There's some changes coming in the CCMR for, it'll get us through this year, but next year they're changing the way that they look at our CCMR stuff, so we'll go through that. Data is collected on the taper report. Data is collected to assign individual campuses letter grades and then compiled for the overall district. So what do they focus on? So there's 3 domains whenever it comes to the accountability. The first domain is being student achievement. That measures performance on STAR tests, and then CCMR. School progress looks at student academic growth, relative performance as compared to other schools, and then the last one is closing the gaps. There's a bunch of different data that they pull for those. It's kind of a messy way to look at it, but I'll go through that when we get to domain 3. They take a bunch of different data sources together to come up with that figure. So domain 1 is student achievement. For elementary and junior high, that's 100% STAR scores, our STAR performance, excuse me. High school, again, is 40% of our STAR, 40% of our CCMR, and then our graduation rate counts for 20%. When it comes to how they figure graduation rate, there's several different ways they can look at it too. They can either give us what our graduation rate was for that year. If it's lower, they can look at our 4 and our 6-year graduation rates and determine which one they're going to use for that. Domain 2, Domain 2, academic growth. All campuses have 100% is for STAR for Part A. Part B is relative performance, which is elementary and junior high would be 100% STAR performance, and then high school would be a 50% combo of STAR performance and then our CCMR data there. Academic growth, which again is a part of this chart down here, is part of domain 2, part A. So whenever our kids get their STAR scores back, they're either given a raw score, which I'll use high school English 1 for example. They say you need a 3775 in order to pass your English 1 test. Kids are given a numerical number that is based off how many questions they got right and what the weight is of those questions. And that helps them determine whether or not they approached, which technically approaching is just under grade level. but that is considered passing as far as STAR is concerned, even though the state will recognize that that is actually just a hair under grade level. And then so that would be approaches. Meets is saying that they meet grade level, they're on their grade level and meeting their expectations, or they masters. This chart right here has low approach, has, you know, if you'll look, it says low does not meet and high does not meet. That technically is not something that we look at that's recognized by the state as passing or not passing. That just means how close were they to passing, and that only comes into effect on academic growth. And this chart kind of explains that. So it doesn't have a direct cutoff where it says what a low does not meet or high does not meet each year. I believe it's relative to state performance is how they determine what the cutoff is for a low does not meet. But let's just say we had a student last year who was a low does not meet kid. They were, you know, for lack of a better term, they were nowhere near passing. And then this year they you know, like if they were taking English 1, they scored a 37.70 and only missed by 5 percentage points. They would be considered a high does not meet. Even though we don't get credit for that student passing the test, we still get a point in our academic growth for that student going from the progress they made through that year. So that's one reason, you know, even talking with the other principals and, you know, as they planned, you know, for the year and future to make sure that we get our academic growth points. And again, you know, not just for accountability, but it's what's right by the kid in general. We want to, you know, not leave those kids who are, you know, we talk a lot about our bubble kids or the kids that are close to passing. It is important to get those kids passing. Excuse me. But also if a kid is, you know, very low on their test, just moving them up to a high does not meet would get us in a point for accountability or for growth there. The same way you can look and you can kind of go through there. If their prior year score, you know, I'll go all the way down to a master's kid. If a kid masters his test the year before, they would need to master again just to show academic growth. The only one that is different is our meets. So the meets again is on grade level. You can look, that's where it's, you know, kind of even money, for lack of a better term. If you were meets last year and you get meets this year, you still do receive that point for there. You don't have to show growth. You don't have to improve in order to get that full point, because the state is saying that student was on grade level. A year later, they're still on grade level. That doesn't mean that they stayed the same. That means they progressed 1 year, which is what is expected from us. So again, that's kind of just this growth chart. That's why I like to put that in there is one of the, you know, the campuses, you know, some of their, so when they start talking about some of their goals and stuff, you know, it's not always about getting kids moved just to pass our test. You know, we want to move our kids within this as well, moving from, you know, if you look at some of the raw scores on different grade levels, even down through the elementary, moving from, it's not an exact percentage to move from approaches to meets. You know, sometimes the gap between approaches and masters is not that far. As far as it is like, you know, in U.S. history, the gap is a little bit wider. Some of those tests have a very narrow gap, so it's only about 7 questions that could get a kid from barely passing to masters. It's really not as far as we think. So again, different tests will kind of have different goals in there, especially as you go through the grade levels. So the last domain is domain 3, closing the gaps. That's the percentage of academic achievement, academic growth, English language proficiency, and STAR performance. That's all for our elementary and junior high campuses. The high school campuses, it's a percentage of academic achievement, 4-year graduation rate, EL proficiency, and then CCMR. So again, just keep in mind as we go through all this, you know, especially with the high school, how much CCMR shows up in each one of these performance categories. So when we kind of talk about the changes, it'll kind of show you how that's going to affect our overall accountability in the future. All right, so the first one we have is the elementary scores. This is for kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grades over those first 2 slides. So they're not actually tested by the state for STAR. They do through different programs. They are I-Ready and M-Class, is that correct? I-Ready and M-Class, they do their beginning of the year and then end of year tests. They'll do a middle one. What's
MTSS?
MTS?
Yes, that would be your kindergarten. Yeah.
For your kindergarten kids. So these are where they're performing at. So again, I'm not gonna read them all to you, but you can kind of we can kind of go down there and look, where our kids are going from. And remember that last column would be 2025. So again, that would be the start of this year, whereas the other two would be last year's scores. It just kind of shows you where they are. Alright, when you get to that next slide where it starts with third grade reading, that's where we actually start with the STAR. The state starts giving us the STAR scores there. Again, with these being campus data, these will be our STAR data that we're getting here. So again, you can start looking at the approaches, meets and masters. That last column, I believe it cut off on the slides, but that last column is 2025, so then it's 2024, 2023, and 2022 is the first column. So sorry, that's not on your slide, but that's how that chart reads there, which you can kind of go back through. So that shows through the years as they go. So again, if you're tracking classes, just remember as you change year, they will be like the third graders in 2022 or your 2023 fourth graders. So that's that class as you track those through there. Make sure we're still recording there.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Johnson?
Absolutely.
So in these percentages that you have, so if you're in the approaches or you are in the meets and
Yeah.
included in the masters because of your explanation earlier about being on grade level or close to passing or?
Yes, so it would be the mirror image of that. But yes, if you're a master's kid, those 7% masters are also that 34% meets. Those students, you are correct. Those students are included in there, and all of those are included in the approaches. So yes, thank you, Ms. Fuquay. That's a good point to make. That 66%, for example, on third grade reading, says that 66% of the class was at approaches or above. That doesn't
Okay.
just me. But yes, ma'am, thank you for clarifying that. And that's one reason, that makes a good point when we're trying to get our kids moved up to masters, of course, that's why we're, as principals, work to, a master's kids technically counts 3 times for us. We get triple the bang for our buck with them. So it's always good to get it's good to have masters in general, but especially for accountability, they hit you a whole lot harder. Let's you raise your hand. Let's see. You gotta raise your hand if you don't want to. Yeah, so fourth and fifth, I'll let you look at. So fourth grade, fifth grade, like I said, we get science in there also. Talking with Ms. Bright at the elementary about just about grades in general, our scores in general, looking to bring everything up, and I know kind of as a district, our goals are, we would prefer, at least 80% on the approaches, so that's somewhere we're start, and then by the end get 20%. If we get 20% masters, same thing. If we're at 20% masters, that trickles all the way down, and of course, that'll get our meets percentage up there in the 40s or above as well. All right, and then elementary TELPAS scores. Again, we don't have the 1 through 4 just now, but those are the 5th grade ones right there. And the way that small percentage chart reads is whether it's no rating would be in the first column. It doesn't exist out there. Beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. So the principals are the same way. As on the campuses, we want to get our students, the longer we have them in our schools and in our ESL programs, we want them advancing through. We don't want them coming to us in 4th grade into beginning level and then graduating as seniors 8 years later, still in the beginning level of the English language. So TELPAS measures their English language proficiency. On the campuses, like I said, that's kind of a goal that we all have, is to move kids and get them graduated and out of the ESL program and mainstreamed as much as we can. but that kind of shows you there, it shows you where those facilities are at. Kind of a quick analysis of that. There was great growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year last year, but there was regression in the beginning of the year. That was for our first and kindergarten and first and second grade students who don't quite take the STAR test yet. Possible reasons for this regression was summer learning loss, challenges with new assessment format, new environment, new grade level, new teachers, different settings, stuff like that, and just having different expectations for kids. That's stuff that we're addressing on the elementary campus and at the elementary level. This chart that you get to down there, of course, is the 2023 elementary accountability. That kind of shows you. So those, if you look over there, I know you guys are probably familiar with this, but if you're not, on the left column over there, it'll show you the three domains: student achievement, school progress, and then closing the gaps. So those are the three domains that we went through. Underneath those, again, with this being an elementary campus, you can see that the STAR performance has data out beside it. It has those 38 component score with a 65 scaled score. There is no, of course, data for CCMR graduation since they're in elementary. But you can kind of look and see how that's weighted. If you'll pay a close attention to that number down there in domain 2, under relative performance, that shows the economically disadvantaged. So there's an indicator from the state every year of what our data selected will be. For us, that will always be economically disadvantaged. There will be this kind of ties into one of the goals that we've been working as a district, as Ms. Greer has been helping the principals make sure that we get call our parents and have our free and reduced lunch forms filled out. That's why we put such an emphasis on that, because that's how that economically disadvantaged number is determined. It's based off of our parents' income and what students are receiving those. So that's why as campuses we make a big deal out of calling those parents, even if it's whether it's inconvenient or not to the parent, and explaining to them the importance of it, how that's tied to our funding, that's tied to our school data, how important that is. So that's just kind of a quick number to pay attention to as we go through these. So that's 23. The next page, of course, would be 2024. Same thing through there. You can look through the differences on those. The bottoms, the distinction designation, those are options that the state gives us for distinction designations. If you perform well in any of those areas, those will be highlighted down there, which at this point we don't have, there aren't distinctions from the state on these three charts.
And that's what I think is interesting. We made a C, D, and an F, but then we have more distinctions as an F campus on elementary.
Oh no, they would be highlighted bold. There's
Okay, so there's no, okay.
There are no distinctions.
Oh, okay, because I thought I saw those, I thought.
We started
No, ma'am.
decreasing every year.
It's probably my toner and my printer.
No, that's okay, because I'm glad you clarified that, because I'm looking at that and thinking, wow, that's a lot of but that's just what you could get.
That's the options, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. They'll be, and I'll call them out when we get to them, but they'll be in very bold.
Okay, great, that makes,
This is pretty interesting.
oh, I see it on the high school, just moving forward, how you did it different, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I just jumped, I was like, wow.
Oh no, you're good question.
I know what she said with the F campus, we got more distinguished.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, but those are just what you
Yeah.
could get and had you.
That
Yes,
we
ma'am.
gotten,
Okay.
even though we decreased every year.
Yes, ma'am. And so that was one of the things, again, talking with Conway Elementary, looking, of course, decreasing in all areas, some of the stuff, targeting kids, tutorials, getting kids moved back up, especially with their reading and their math, is just one of the plans that the campus has to make sure, getting kids performing well on STAR. And with the elementary and junior high, like I said, with them being so heavily weighted on STAR, those STAR scores really do affect their accountability a ton, whereas, like I said, the high school has a CCMR to kind of prop them up. The elementary and junior high don't have that advantage, so they're very heavily based on STAR scores. So that takes us through 2025. All right, so junior high, the junior high is laid out the same way. This one's just, I kind of set their scores up a little bit different. It'll be this first page will be reading, and then the next page will be math, science, and social studies, but it's the same way, 22, 23, 24, and 25. you can see kind of how they've progressed, or digressed in areas or progressed in some areas throughout the years. Still recording here, okay. So then after the star scores, again, here is the junior high tail toss. And it's the same way those charts, for instance, like that first chart doesn't have a column over on the far left side. That would be a no rated side, beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. So again, you can kind of look, again, you can kind of start seeing where our percentages are. Again, we want more kids in that far right column, over in the advanced high, and then of course graduated from the program in the tail toss. I'll go ahead and look, we can go ahead and look at accountability there for them also. So again, they're like our elementary campus. They don't have CCMR or graduation rates being taken into effect. Which you can look from 23, 24, and 25. So one of the things that kind of stuck out, and there was from 23, 24, and 25, there was a jump in there closing the gaps percentage. Again, that had been in F for 2 years and actually came up to a C. But again, we went 60, their overall grade was 65, 60, and then 67 this year for the 2025 accountability. So if we'll look at the analysis on that, again, just kind of giving an overview of that data we just looked at. The overall scaled score went from last year from a 60 to a 70. Closing the gap score went from a 47 to a 72, which is an F up to a D. And academic growth score scale went from a 56 to a 65. Some of their intervention that they're looking at, master schedule changes, core areas earlier in the day. So again, I know they reworked their schedule this year to have, to put some of their extracurricular stuff and their electives in the afternoon to make sure during their mornings they're getting good instruction. They started intervention programs on Fundamental Fridays, and then they're going to kind of continue I-ready desegregation. Ways they're wanting to improve is continue work with closing the gap and data desegregation across the grades, increase rigor and stamina earlier in the year, ELL small group instruction with the ESL class, and have certified and hiring certified high quality teachers across the board. Talking with other principals too, stuff that everybody's looking at too is a lot of times we do focus on our bubble kids, and of course, like I said, our kids who aren't passing. Just some of the goals that we have as a campus and I want to keep moving forward is targeting our master's kids too. And again, if you look back on that academic growth chart, realizing if we can get any kids to masters, like I said, those numbers will keep showing back up in your data and keep repeating themselves, and you'll keep showing the benefits from those anytime you get kids moved up. All right, to high school. So high school's a little bit different. Again, this is just with their testing is completely different too. So once in junior high and elementary, they test once a year in the spring for their STAR scores. They get their grade and then they move on to the next grade the next year. With high school, they do retesting. So for instance, Algebra 1 is the first one on there. Students are tested as freshmen here as in Algebra 1, and they can retest on those until they pass. Potentially, if you test the first time your first year, you can test 3 times a year after that. So potentially a student would take 10 tests if they fail one of their freshman tests. So that student will keep showing up in the numbers throughout the year. The way the state tracks those though is by cycles. That cycle technically starts in June of whatever year they test. For freshmen, they only get one chance to pass that test in that cycle because they will not be testing in June and December. Those are only retesters. So if you're a freshman taking algebra for the first time, you basically have one shot in that cycle to test. If you're a retester, if you're a sophomore who is still taking the freshman test, they most likely will have tested if they failed in spring, they will test in June, December, and then again in spring. The way the state counts that is that the student, if they fail their freshman year, they go down as a fail, as it did not pass for you. And then once they start the new cycle, which is in June, December, and then that spring testing of their sophomore year, they take the best result from that cycle, and that's what shows up on your accountability data. So if a kid, let's say by the end of their sophomore year, they could have been, let's just say they haven't passed at all, they failed it 4 times. They technically, on your accountability data, will have only failed once as a freshman and then once again as a sophomore. So that's why sometimes whenever campuses look at the data, their numbers that they have on their testing data is slightly different because they look at how many tests were administered over how many tests failed. When it comes back from the state, they could be slightly different just because they take the worst. If a kid tested 3 times, they'll take the worst 2 results out of those. But with the high school testing too, it's tied into their graduation. So students will need to pass 3 out of their 5 tests. We do projects for the other 2, but that's kind of a whole nother story. But they need to test in order to be eligible for graduation. They'll have to pass 3 of their 5 state exams. So algebra and English 1 right here on the first ones are offered as freshmen. Again, this chart reads left to right, going from 22 up to 2025. We'll kind of show you where kids are at there. And then English 2 and biology are sophomore tests, and then U.S. history is a 11th grade junior test. And then of course that next page will be TELPOS data. So same thing, in high school, I'll say that's an area that the high school is focusing on too. Is we see a lot of very stagnant scores coming out of our TELPAS. We don't see kids progressing and moving. In the past couple of years, a lot of kids have even regressed a little bit on some of their scores. Part of it is not practicing and using the English language, but also part of it, a big chunk of it, we feel is testing strategy. The way we had our tests set up, kids go in there, they're not comfortable speaking, and if a big portion of the TELPOS test is that student speaking into a microphone in English. Sometimes, we know the kids are capable of, doing advanced high or, even at, definitely off the beginning level. They go into the test and we get their scores back and they're very low. We're trying to change the way a little bit, get our testing rooms a little bit smaller and get them separated, maybe, and having good strategies, letting the kids practice, making sure that those kids, the first time that they speak into and do that is absolutely not the test day. We want them practicing this test, and just using repetition a lot, will help, help our TELPAS kids. They do, we do run 3 sections of ESL, at the high school. For instance, with elementary, a lot of times they see bilingual classrooms. Ours are, we do ESL, and then get those kids in mainstream classes and they hear instruction in English. One of the things that we're really working with, not only to help our TELPAS scores, but if you go back and look, the English scores at the high school are performing under this state. With 57% and 55%, those are below state level. Certainly the weakest scores that we have at the high school are our English. Seeing the meets and masters percentages are not where we want those either. I believe that is an area that we could show a lot of improvement. We have, for instance, English 2 with over the past 4 years, we can look at, we have seen 2% of our students mastering that. We have a lot of intelligent kids, even some of our higher performing kids, may just not have a great grasp on the English language, too, and that shows up in, just because of language in a lot of our tests. And so again, we're looking to get those students who are struggling to learn, we're looking to get them support in the class that can help them, test. A big part of the English 1 and English 2 tests are also writing. Over the past few years, the state has shown that 35% of the students in the state of Texas score a 0 on their writing, which means they got 0. There's a extended constructive response, and then there's 2 short constructive responses, and 35% of the kids in the state have got 0 percentage points. Kermit, we're actually higher than that. Ours are right under 50. So about 48% of our kids in the past couple years have got 0 points. Whenever you go back and look, most of those kids did not write anything, or they did not respond and answer the question. A large percentage of those being our emergent bilingual students. They don't have a good grasp on the English language to formulate, not only, even if you understand the language, it's hard to formulate thought and get that put on the paper, but especially if you don't have a good grasp of the English language. So again, that's some of the strategies that the high school is working with, not only improve our TOPAS scores, but hopefully that trickles down and gets our English scores up as well.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So are kids put in and tested like at the high school level, or most of these kids coming up are the non-English speakers?
So we do get a lot of move-ins. So and those will be, we'll check off of their home language survey when they come in. So if a kid is, like if they've been with us, if they speak language, if they speak Spanish at home, they'd ask them, what language do you speak and what language do you speak at home? And if they speak a language other than English, normally at home, they'll go into our ESL. But then a lot of the kids that start in high school, they move in and on their home language survey, whether they're from out of country or whether they're in country, they could be they'll be put into ESL classes, which will put them in TOPAS.
So you could have a brand new person going in 9th grade. Absolutely. Instead of moving up through the ranks and
yes,
exiting, like you said earlier.
Yes.
You may have brand new people coming in at 15 years old.
Yes, ma'am. And start testing.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am. So they bring them in, and we'll set them down, and they get, like if we get a new kid who is new to the ESL program, or new to U.S. schools completely, they'll get in our ESL program, but they basically got about 6 months to get
And they have
prepared.
to test.
So there is a waiver for English 1 that kids who are new to the country can come in, and they can get a waiver to take the English 1 test. I believe it's 2 years. If they are new to U.S. schools and haven't been there for 2 years, we can do an English 1 waiver, but after that, they're required to test regardless of, as soon as they are eligible by credits to test, we test them. So we have to.
And typically, in our part of the country, it's Spanish that move in.
But in the big cities, it could be German, Chinese, you know, any of that is considered ESL. But in our part of the country, it's mostly Spanish.
Well, I was
But
just
we
doing
do
this
have a
student
few-
counts, and you can
Yeah.
tell you're getting lower,
Yes, ma'am.
but I just was wondering, you know, that's what made me wonder, cause like, you are moving and you're getting kids out, but I just wondered how many of those were, you know, if, like, we've had a boom
Yes.
of the oil field, and
Uh,
so
so-
you're bringing in, so they could bring a child at 15 who's never been exposed
No.
to
That's
English,
true. Mhm.
and you've gotta put them in a program, you've gotta test them, and then you've gotta try to academically move them and get them out in a very short time frame.
Yes.
And there's different ideas about that, statistically. Some people think immersion is great, which is you just throw them in there, sink or swim, you learn the language. And then there are some people who disagree with that they need to be supported and given some time to learn the language. And so it's
So our kids aren't, so on that, our kids aren't just immersed in the regular classes, they have the special classes, is
they have
that what you're
support,
saying?
yes.
Support.
They have the support.
So, okay,
So
Yes.
for a guarantee one period a day with our ESL class, they'll be in, and the focus of the ESL class is learning the English language. And then we provide supports with our ESL teacher while they're in other academic classes. Like, let's use English as an example, that's one of the ones we're targeting. We'll provide them language supports in their academic class also. So they do have the class learning the language, but once they go to like the English classroom, we're not focused on them learning English in that moment. We're saying we're teaching you, but we are helping you in your native language to understand the material in English, because that's what they'll be tested.
so the ESL is not, I mean, it's learning the language, it's not a specific math, English, biology, it's just learning the
Language.
language.
English as a second language, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
At the high school.
At the high school, yes.
Okay.
At the high school.
Yeah, elementary,
Totally
bilingual, a little.
Yeah, elementary's a little different.
Alright, so high school accountability from 23, 24, and 25 will be those next three charts. So again, you can, if you'll look at CCMR in there, just again, that'll kind of bring us to our good news, bad news portion of the, of the talk. So.
From a finance standpoint, they said CCMR is a couple of years behind.
Financially, yes. ma'am.
Yes, but on your side, it's not academically.
No, ma'am, it's 1 year like the rest of it, it's next
Okay.
year's, but yes, ma'am. I believe that's right, yeah, cause the money coming in, yeah, would be looking at 22, 23.
It's years, okay, just, okay.
But that's high school, so yeah, you can see on the high schools, they're on their accountability, so, CCMR graduation rate, again, for us with, graduating right around 100 kids, every kid's a percentage point, of course, y'all can do math. The less kids we have in there, one dropout, and start getting, or 2 or 3 dropouts are no longer, those are 2 to 3 percentage points, based on the class size. So that's one reason, we make sure, our leavers, our at-risk kids, we track cohorts to make sure that if a kid is supposed to be graduating, in 2028, we're making sure we're keeping that kid graduating in 2028. They're not losing their cohort or staying behind. It's all stuff we track to make sure that our graduation rates stay high. You can kind of even see with star performance. I'll use like I said, the high school, a 40 on 2025. It's a 43. It's stayed right around there. It's been coming up from 41, 42, 43 and that's the overall star performance. With that being a 43, you can see that number is a 72. Those, even with our graduation rate being 100% and our CCMR being at 99, that number still averages out to an 88, which is a B. The weights on those, again, if you remember, star performance is 40%, CCMR is 40%, and then graduation rate is 20%. So if you average those together by weight, you get 88. Which means that, you know, the good news, bad news for the high school, it is a B. However, that college, the CCMR being a 99, still has not pulled the high school up to an A, even with a 100% graduation rate, you know, and that's because of star performance. Star performance is gonna have to be higher, if A's ever gonna be in the conversation, which right now that scaled score is a 72. So that's just, I mean, the reality of high school. So we talked a lot about the CCMR, the things that are changing with those. The state has said up until now that a kid is, if they're in college classes, get an associate's degree, they join the military, or they are in a college prep course, we get a CCMR point for them, along with if they're in a pathway and can complete an industry-based certification. I'll kind of go through those in a second, but right now what we do with the plan that the high school has been for years is to, you know, we offer college classes, we do offer a CTE program, we offer industry-based certifications. For the past few years, that number's been right around 9, based on the nursing program. That's what has got us, the only IBCs we have obtained have been nursing, which is fine, that was what we were doing. In the upcoming years, the state has now said that so if, I guess to go back, if a kid is not in college classes, if they have not passed their TSI, which their TSI test gives them, that says they're college ready, or if they, you know, even if they were not in the nursing program getting that IBC, we have put them in College Bridge, and we have said every student will take our college prep class and they will earn a CCMR point for us. The state has now said that the program that we use is no longer recognized. College Bridge is not going, after this year, will no longer be recognized by the state as a creditable college prep course. They have given us a list of college prep approved courses. I believe there's only 5 of them. We've been using College Bridge for math and reading. The state has only approved 5 for reading, and they did not approve any for math. In my opinion, that is them telling us that they're no longer gonna be accepting College Bridge. That's their nice way of saying that's not gonna happen anymore, because they did not approve a single math program for the state of Texas to use. That being said, so that is one reason that our kids, that we see a 99 and 100% there, is because every kid, the only exception to it, and you know, that I could almost, you know, we could tell you down to the kid who that was, the only reason a kid would not would just be for graduation purposes, or not completing College Bridge would be the only reason that we would ever came off of 100. So now we're with college prep going away, we have to qualify kids in other ways. You know, there's a standard on the ACT test that they would have to meet. They would have to pass their TSI. What we've been looking to do in prep for this for the past couple of years is we've started growing our CTE program. Of course, the district is building on to help grow. We're starting getting more options for our kids to get IBCs, the industry-based certifications. Last year we went from 9 2 years ago to I believe in the mid-20s last year. And by December we should have around 40 to 50 kids. By next year, hopefully we can get that up to where we have a bunch more kids completing. The problem is the state requires you to not only, you know, they can't just be participating in CTE classes to take these tests. They want them in pathways, in approved programs of study, and they will spend 4 years in the same program of study. So let's take our welding kids. They're gonna come in and they're gonna take introduction to welding, welding 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And when on their 4th year, we have our welding teacher. He's certified through the state to give this test. We got him certified last year, so he can actually offer the test to these kids. They weld, and then a certified welding inspector comes in. We have to save the samples, and they'll come in and look at these and determine whether or not they passed. But Coach Gallegos is certified to give the test and then approve them for passing. If the state wants to send somebody, they will come and look at those welding samples to make sure, and then those kids will go down as completers of an IBC, and that'll be a points to our credit. We started on that 2 years ago, and like I said, we've started some new programs, and we're trying to get kids pushed in there to make sure we get those. One of our ways we're doing it is our our ag program, and it's kind of a two-edged sword with that ag program. We've got a lot of kids, a lot of young kids in our ag program. Realistically, it's a hard program to support because of how many kids that we have in it, and every year that they go, like I'll take last year, we had 7 classes of intro to ag, and so these kids were all taking, well, next year, we will have new kids taking intro to ag. Now we have to offer ag 2, yeah, and ag 1. Well, we can't just add another teacher every year, so we've made sure that our welding program was changed from welding to auto welding mechanics, which allows ag 1 to count for welding 1, so those kids can now branch off into ag. Food science is another option. Instead of kids just being in ag, they can go into our culinary arts class. So now our culinary arts teacher can take some of those kids out of ag and put them in food science, and that also counts. And luckily our culinary arts teacher this year is both certified for culinary arts, and she also has her ag certification, which allowed us to do that, which is kind of why it's kind of a unicorn, but that's why we can kind of pull those, because she can do both of those through ag. But anyway, that's kind of the beast we're running into with CCMR, just for everybody there. All right, analysis of the high school. Some of the good things we progressed. Academy ratings a B. There was a distinction in math this year. Our math scores did increase from a 79 up to an 84, and then we saw increases in our meets and masters, which is the reason for the distinction in math. Closing the gaps came up from a 68 up to an 80. Some of the interventions that we're making this year is through with our retesters, they have to go into intervention programs. So those are kids who didn't pass the test the year before, whether it's in reading or math is where we offer those. Any kid who, like I said, who doesn't pass goes into those classes. We're just trying to give them, this is in addition to their English or their math class, to give them extra support, so whenever they go retest, we try to get them to pass that test. We've changed that. We've kind of absorbed one of our computer classes into another class, which allowed us to add a math intervention position without adding teachers onto our school. So that position, even though we have an additional math teacher this year, we didn't add an actual person to our campus because the other position was absorbed. So that's one of the strategies we're using to make sure we have a good math interventionist who's helping with our math scores, and then an English interventionist who's only helping English and not having to combine those together. How are we going to improve? Data analysis shows specific needs for areas of improvement in English language arts amongst our English learner population. ESL interventionists, English 1 and English 2 teachers are targeting these kids. And then the master schedule being reworked to sort. That was what we were talking about with our ESL teacher going into classrooms to provide support to our English kids. That's kind of one of the ways we're fighting against those. And to help our math scores continue helping them, we would like our Algebra 1 teacher to, since she is the one who teaches those kids, I'd love for her to be able to see her retesters. So with that new math interventionist, we were able to take one of her preps off of her and give it to that teacher, and she can now see not every single kid who's going to take her test this year. She will see them at least once a day. So that's one of the ways that we're kind of trying to improve our math scores there. Sorry, questions on high school? Makes your brain hurt. All right, district accountability. So those are our quick. Are we still recording? Yes. Okay. District accountability. That's our accountability as a district. So the way they take those is they take your elementary, junior high, and high school, they combine them together, and that gives you the district score. So with all that put together.
And looking at those, they've changed the categories that they give you percentages in. 23 and 24, you used to get proportion of overall rating in student achievement, got 0%. And school progress got 70% in 23, 24, and then it flipped in 24.
They weight them on your highest category.
Oh, they do?
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. So that's an option. And you'll also see, like if you flip back to the high school here,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I know it's small, but there's a little check mark beside relative performance. So that's telling that all they're doing is they're indicating which one of those was higher, which was the data they grabbed out of those.
Okay,
For us, like I said, I don't know, but we're most likely always gonna be eco-dis on that one.
Oh, yes.
economically disadvantaged,
okay,
just that gets found. That's why I saw the, yes, good points there. 70, that's why they flipped the weighting percentages based on
Okay.
which one's higher.
interesting.
And then as a district, the only distinction that we are eligible for is post-secondary readiness for those. And then that's kind of, that kind of gets us through accountability. Like I said, I know as a district, we're all working together, the principals and, all of us, we all work together to make sure that, our kids are growing. Basically, that was one reason, this specific data was shared too, was our STAR, we talk a lot about STAR and all that. Our STAR scores are so heavily impacted in all this. That's why a large focus of everything we do is talking about, improving our STAR scores. And, until they change, they try not to, is it 5 years, Ms. Greer? They try not to change accountability. So every 5 years, they try to leave you in the same accountability system. They try not to mess with you there. I know 5 years ago in the past, they reworked a little bit, which is why, we're getting a little bit of rework like our CCMR stuff in there.
And I think they're gonna go to they're gonna change it 2 years, and then they're gonna wait till 2040 to change again in accountability. I think that's what we learned.
I think so. I
Something
think
like
that
that.
was
That's a
right.
long time.
Yes.
With they gotta get, I know it takes a long time to change all even the tests and the standards and all that. I guess if they change the STAR, we'll find out. I don't know what we'll do there. This taper report, I'm not gonna go through all that with this, line by line for sure, that it has a lot of the same data that we looked at. This is just a good representation of where to see it. Some of the things that are in this paper report that aren't in ours are just, our attendance rates, stuff like that, our graduation rates, it kind of spread those out in there. Right now for us, luckily being a small school, we're able to track those very easily because we know them, we know all the kids by name and we know where they are. STAR, one thing that I've learned recently on this that I'm sure everybody else knew, but I didn't, was that the attendance on our STAR, the amount of kids taking the STAR, they really hurt us if they don't take the test. I've always known it's negatively affected us. I just didn't know how it's equally to failing. So if they are not, if it falls below a certain percentage, so that's one thing. Talking to all the principals too, that we want to do is STAR day, make sure we've got plans for testing and makeup testing, and when we get our usually a 10-day window to get those in there. That's why we all meet together and we plan with Ms. Greer, has us all making sure we have days before our test. If a kid is leaving, they can take it early. If they miss the test, we have days built in that we can take it afterwards. So that's how kind of, that's a reason, just a good data reason why we do, how it affects even the way that we schedule our STAR tests and stuff.
And on that point, it's kind of contradictory because the state also allows parents of students who do not want to take the test to opt out. So that hurts us accountability wise, but the state gives them that right to opt out of taking the test.
Lockdown. Blocks. Lights. Out of sight.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Blocks. Lights. Out of
So
sight.
if you opt out of the test, do you still have to take the test and pass it to advance?
So that's a question that, like the high school, now elementary and junior high, no,
Right.
you don't have to.
But you have to pass
But
3 of the 5 at the high school,
The
if I recall.
state, yes, requires you to pass it, so that's a parent decision. I mean, if they opt out of taking the test, we pull them in and say, these are your options. Yes, you can do that. However, your child's not gonna graduate because it's a requirement of graduation services. So it's kind of, no, it's kind of a double-edged sword there for parents. They can,
They can,
And
But-
what would be the point of it? Stress, the
Yeah.
child can't handle it?
yeah. I've heard, from what I've
Mental.
heard, this is just religious beliefs too. Yeah, we have something and we're not doing that, and they don't want, different things like that, and it's not.
Because I know it is stressful for a lot of kids. And for mental health, there's so much on mental health. I just wondered if it's,
Not good.
yeah, it's hard
It's a
decision.
deal in its own, but
Mhm. We haven't had that yet.
thank goodness. Yeah, we have not. So anyway, like I said, I'm not gonna go through that whole thing with you guys, but, do y'all have anything else before we wrap it up? I know everybody's got stuff to do today.
Good report.
no, thank you, I learned a lot.
Thank you for the
Appreciate
explanation.
it.
Thank
I
y'all.
learned a
Lock
lot
the in
from
Jack.
that with the masters being in every.
Well, I
that
just,
approach,
yeah,
cause
because
yeah, that was good to know.
that makes sense,
It
because you're
does,
building
it's
on
good,
each
yeah,
other.
So I like
You
that.
know, so
Mhm.
if you scored up here, you would think you could
And that-
masters that
Then you're
you,
gonna be needs and you're also gonna be.
no wonder
approaches,
you
so-
need the, what did you
Yes,
say,
that's why we
20,
push for
40
the-
or,
Yes.
40, 40, 80, yes.
yeah, no wonder you
Push
want
for
such
the
high.
masters. Yes, cause you get
Because you're-
3 points with them are master students, cause they're in their places, they're in needs.
Yeah, they're in the 3 categories.
Categories.
And I wish I would've included it in I should've put it in my slides, when we were at the accountability the other day, they put a really good example. It was 2 schools, and they just kinda asked you which one you thought would have a better
Mhm.
star outcome, and it was, one of them had a 100% pass rate, and the other one was, and again, I wish I would've kept it it was like a 75% pass rate, but they had 20% masters or something like that. And the 75% pass rate way outperformed the
Yes,
100%
because of
pass
those
rate. Yeah.
masters kids,
Yeah.
yes, you get that.
Because you
triple
get
point.
the points.
Yes,
Tripled up on
and
it.
so that one with even 100% passing rate may have had more in approach than.
So like this
not
24% of masters, you get 3 points for the, whatever total amount of kids did that. And then the meets, you get 2 points for that, and you get 1 for masters. I mean approaches.
Approaches, yeah.
Yes.
So
it wouldn't
that's
be-
why
So
we
you want-
push that masters to get the 3 points, cause if they're
Yeah.
gonna master, I mean, that means they're in the approach area.
Yeah, that algebra 1 is perfect as far as
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
the
yeah,
percentage
that
and how
looks
many
good.
points you can get, because it's exactly the way it needs to be. Now, of course, your teachers need to understand this as well,
We're working on
on
it.
every campus.
Well, I noticed on the TAPER report in 23-24, we had a 35% turnover rate for teachers versus 19.1 on the state.
Yeah.
So
We
I'm
got a
sure
big
that
turnout.
affects.
And cause even looking at, the junior high, when you looked at the junior high, the 23, 24, 25, they had a different administrator every year.
Oh,
They did.
Exactly, but like he said, he's able to use these different teachers and
Yes.
he's building upon it, like the welding teacher and the ag teacher. I mean,
Oh,
like
yeah.
when you
He-
have the same teachers and they're certified in multiple
Yes,
things,
he's kept the same teacher.
then you don't have to add a teacher for each thing. You can
But,
be creative.
and administration has been pretty steady for the past
It
6
has.
years at high school versus junior high.
Or elementary.
Yeah, elementaries, yeah,
Oh, my
changed,
goodness.
I guess the assistant changed, though.